rebellious people of Sudan, my people. Those who have stood firm in the face of oppression, those who gave their lives in the pursuit of democracy, and those we have lost to a war waged to extinguish our dreams of freedom. But they never will. Their sacrifice is not forgotten, and their struggle remains our collective cause. And for you all distinguished guests and bright minds in the room and the future leaders, thank you for being here today. In 2018, the Sudanese people led a 6-month uprising against 30 years of dictatorship, destruction, human rights violation, and complete isolation from both the regional and international communities. Of course, the legacy of colonialism played a major role, but I am a firm believer in the African proverb: when there is no enemy within, the enemy outside you. Young people came together and formed neighborhood committees at level, city, state, and then cross-state levels. A massive civilian coalition was born, bringing together professional unions and youth groups. The regime was ousted in April 2019. I'm proud to have been part of the movement on the street and through media advocacy, where I gave regular interviews on international news outlets, and I was even imprisoned once for organizing a protest. In September 2019, a transitional government was formed after long deliberation within the civilian coalition. I was named Minister of Youth and Sport, the youngest female minister and the fairest woman to ever hold the position. When I accepted the nomination, I was determined that youth must be included. It was time to transition from activism to build a country. On my first day at the ministry, after the meet and greet, I realized two things. I would always be the youngest in the room, and the deep state was rooted. Many staff have been appointed solely based on loyalty to the previous regime, and they would likely resist reform. My first decision was to read every report they had piled in a room next to my office. And when I say a pile, I mean it. I stayed up reading night after night, and I think that prepared me for the reading loads here at Oxford. I'm doing an MPP here at the Clovaca School of Government. But seriously, one of the biggest mistakes leaders make is failing to do their homework. They rely on briefings and don't understand what they are holding in their hands. Yes, time is limited, but please read the reports, don't sign and make decisions blindly. Through those documents, I began to understand the scale of the problem. Corruption was rampant. Some departments had no structure or job description. Youth made up only 5% of the workforce. Can you imagine, in the Ministry of Youth and Sport, only 5% of the workforce below the age of 35. Many staff had not shown up for years. The ministry was renting a building because the former minister had sold the government-owned one. Everything was in disarray. But I want to acknowledge the few genuine civil servants who fought back before me and with me. My vision was clear: fight corruption, be inclusive, and shift the ministry from a passive body used to radicalize the youth into an institution that empowers them, not just in name, but in policy, resources, and opportunity. We also use sport as a tool for democracy and peace building. I believe then, as I believe now, that public institutions are engines of change and transition. And far too often in Africa, we forget that. We started with institutional building and reform. We created new structures, introduced job descriptions, and brought in a generation ready to lead. Together we drafted Sudan's fairest national youth policy, grounded in data collected from all parts of the country. including internal displacement camps and prisons. We didn't just write a strategy. We listened. I personally engaged with over 10,000 young people across 14 states out of the 18 states, meeting in youth centers, under trees, and in their own communities, too often overlooked. Some places told me it was the first time they had ever seen a government official, let alone a minister. We convened the conference on youth and economic reform, engaging youth, experts, and stakeholders from all the 18 states. I led a panel on youth and economic reform where youth presented the recommendation directly at the National Economic Conference. These were adopted by the cabinet. A true example of inclusive policy making where young people shape national policy. We introduced a new law mandating women's and disability sports, transparent financing, and democratic election within federations. Reform wasn't just administrative, it was political too. I was the first minister in my cabinet to file corruption cases against senior leaders of the old regime. I then held a press conference sharing all the evidence with the public, both to establish transparency and to protect the case. If anything were to happen to myself, the public would know the truth about corruption. We froze assets in one of the largest corruption cases in the country's history. We cut waste and saved billions while increasing our public transport. But what I am most proud of isn't the policy or all the things that I mentioned. It's about the spirit we reignited. In partnership with some international organization, we trained over 25,000 young people as independent observers to monitor the democratic transition in the country. We launched Youth Democracy and Innovation and Entrepreneurship Centers, and we brought peace building into villages and camps, places where politics had only ever arrived through violence. As a cabinet member, of course, I helped shape national policy, participated in peace negotiations, and contributed to talks that led to Sudan removal from the US terrorism list. But I never forgot where legitimacy comes, from the people. So I opened the ministry doors, held press conferences, hosted forums, and took hard questions live, because that's what democracy demands. Leadership is not about holding power, it's about holding space for others to rise, to speak, and shape the future. I carry the memory of those years not just with pride, but with purpose, because the war that erupted in Sudan was not just about politics, it was a violent attempt to hold a democratic awakening, but let all agree that no matter the hit, we will always hold that hope and be determined to follow the path of our ancestors and to put Africa as a leading continent that has all the resources and the human power to be a leading continent. Thank you very much.
Please do a big round of applause for that. And then let's go to this podium. We'd like to invite the former Chief of Staff to the former President of Kenya and the Director of Tony Blair Foundation, Mr. Waka.
I don't have any notes. I was in a rural school called Sheffield University. And my last visit to Oxford was in 1998 when I came to see how the other half lives. And it still looks just as beautiful. And I still suffer from FOMO of not having an Oxford degree in my resume. So for those of you who are studying here, please just hold this degree with the esteem that we all see it from the outside. I am a father, I am 49 years old, I am a lawyer by training. I have lived most of my career in the private sector, in the telco space. I ran a public policy team in the biggest telco in Africa, Safaricom, a member of the Vodafone Group. And I then transitioned into government in 2015 to set up a delivery function for the new president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, at the time. And let me tell you, when you hear leaders talking about making promises and promises not being fulfilled, it's not because they don't want to fulfill those promises. It's because they've not understood how to work the levers of government. My job was to break the bureaucracy and ensure that political intent was transformed into action on the ground. I did that for 8 years, with my last posting being as Chief of Staff to the President. And like in any setup, where the king goes, all his men go with him. My president retired in 2022, and a new president was elected, and a new team is now in place. I now have the privilege of working for an inspirational man called Tony Blair, who still almost in his 70s can manage to do 10 trips a week, can manage to hold court with over 50 heads of state every year, can manage to roll out significant support to inspirational leaders. I run the Tony Blair Institute in Africa. I work with 18 heads of government. I was so proud to see President Biyo standing here and talking about Feed Salon, because he's been an inspirational leader. We've been working closely with him to take Feed Salon from paper into action. I feel that maybe one message I need to get to you is you cannot be ambivalent about being an African. You must love your continent. You must love the fact that you're an African. And when people cut your hand, you must bleed Africa. And the reason I say this is because nobody will love you. Ngozi mentioned here that nobody is coming to save us. There's been a lot of talk about future leaders. There's no future leaders. The time is now. The time is today. And for me, whatever role I can play to share skills, knowledge, and expertise in shaping you to be the leaders that we need, you can be sure that my full commitment and time will be given to that. I am a great believer in black and white, but my experience in government has told me that gray is also a color. And it exists, and you must learn to navigate in the gray, in the black, and in the white. Thank you.
People, a big round of applause. Now we're going to talk sports, so we're going to manage the conversation round and round. We'll take at least 1 minute for response so we can get more questions, then we'll have the audience to take the rest of the 10 minutes. Is that okay? That sounds like a deal, right? How many people want to ask questions? Wow. Alright, so we're going to start first with Dr. Owusu Mensah. You have a lot of work in history and research, and I just want to inquire on when it comes to political research that shape inclusive and accountable governance, how do you see political party system in 1 minute?
Thank you very much. As the teacher is speaking on me, it's very difficult, but I'll try to do my best. Political research is very important for political parties because, one, every political party has a political philosophy. A philosophy that is ingrained in Western ideas. But at the end of the day, how do you translate these ideas into workable programs and quality of life of the citizen in the context of the Ghanaian or the context of the Kenyan, South African or Malawian society. So first, you need to do that. Two, you also need to put up the best candidates. How do you put out the best candidate? You can only put out the best candidate when you have done research about the candidates, where they come from, which ethnic group they belong to in that particular constituency, who are you selecting as a presidential candidate, what his ideas, what are his philosophy, what are his background positives, what are his background negatives, how do you make sure you minimize the negatives, which will be the positive for the opposition party, how do you project his good part that can be used for the election at the end of the day. Beyond that, what is the program of the political party? That is also very important. Two, when the political party is in government, how are you ensuring that you are able to track your performance? I'm happy brother was talking about delivery unit. In the last NPP administration or the government that's less lost power, they also have delivery unit. It's so easy to print a political party manifesto, but when you come to government, because there are so many demands, little resources, you are not able to implement all of them. Then you have a delivery unit, they are able to tell you, you have 15 ministries. This ministry, what have you delivered within this time? This ministry, what can you deliver this? What are the constraints? Because at the end of the day, you'll be going back to the drawing board. Lastly, let me just say that as a political party, you must know your performance if this election is held today, so that you can make changes to the program that you are pursuing. If you have to fire some of your ministers, you'll be able to fire them because they are not bringing anything back to the table. But at the end of the day, political party, your main mandate is that you want to win an election. And you don't win election with words. You win an election based on science, based on data, based on your analysis of the issue on the ground, issues that resonate well with the people. Thank you.
No, that was great, that was great. I'm glad that we are speaking in 1 minute, a very, very rich 1 minute. And I'd like to switch to you, Honorable Ansari. You hold a very incredible constituent as a woman leading the Public Accounting Committee in Ghana Parliament. We just like to know your challenges. What is it like? How serving that role, and how does it inspire more women in leadership?
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope I also get a lecture's 1 minute. The Public Accounts Committee, if I should just throw a little more light on, is a committee that's mandated by Parliament and the Constitution that they will look at all public expenditure that have been audited by the Auditor General of any country, and it's across the African countries. They all have a Public Accounts Committee. So what we do is that those who are assigned, every ministry comes before the Public Accounts Committee, and then you are assessed on what you have done. But let me say that it's not just the chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee, but any woman in leadership. There are two things that are very, very clear. The first is that they ask, is she qualified? Is she capable? That's the first thing that comes to mind. Then the second thing is political tension. Whether in the political party, in the governance space, or any other working area, there's political tension. So these two things. But I believe that whether the person is qualified. With the Public Accounts Committee, you must be a chartered accountant. It shouldn't be just because you're a woman, they want to lower the bar for you. It has to be basic. That is the prerequisite qualification. Is she? Yes, you have the right qualification. And then two, you need to state your values clear and loud. That you should have credibility, such that your main aim is, or your loyalty is to the public purse. And so once you have a distinct values, that this is me, this is how I want to go about it, people will respect you and people will open up and then come to you. And then two, with the political tensions, I strongly believe that once you lay your rules clear and loud, it will be easier for people to get to know you, and that will also kill that political tension. And I must say that in all spheres of life, whether a man or a woman, you need a team, you need your family to support you. And for me, I have a wonderful husband who supports me through and through, and he's here with me today to listen to me. And so I believe that one, you should be capable. You shouldn't lower the bar because you're a woman, because it should be the same at all times. And then two, you should try as much as possible to state your values clear and loud. Your credibility is at stake, and so you make sure that whatever you do is above board. And the main aim of the Public Accounts Committee is to make sure that we try to reduce public infractions and safeguard the public purse. And so your loyalty shouldn't be to any party, your loyalty should be to safeguarding the public purse. And I believe that once you are able to put this out loud and clear, you should be able to surmount any challenges that may come your way, irrespective of whether you're a public accounts chairperson or any leadership position that any woman will find herself in. That is what I think I should.
Very incredible. Another rich 1 minute. Great response so far. And this question is specifically to you, Honorable Woolard. For most of you who don't know, Woolard was instrumental in the transition in Sudan. I'd like to ask, in terms of the democratic transition, how does it inform youth inclusion in political leadership? Does it present a very incredible case with your experience?
First of all, I always say that, Africa is a young continent. The majority of the population are young people below the age of 75. So governments, civil society leaders, they don't have to look at youth as target groups, but they are political actors. In Sudan, and that was the case in Sudan, and I know this is the case in Nigeria and Liberia and in all the other African continents. We need to look at youth as political actors. They can do, the activism work, the campaigning, but again, we need to transition youth into nation building. In Sudan, that was the case, but for me, within the ministry, we designed the youth policy and we mandated all ministries to include youth in all their national policy making. So I'm a firm believer that for a country that the majority of its nation is youth, when you form health policy, education policy, youth should be part of the decision-making process. That's why when we convened the Youth Economic Conference, and then we took those recommendations and they were rectified by the cabinet to be part of the national economic policy. So this kind of youth inclusion. Also, as I said, we trained youth. We formed this network of 25,000 youth. We call them the Youth Independent Observers. Of course, we had to work with the third party to make sure that the process is transparent, to monitor the democratization and the transition in Sudan. So yes, youth are instrumental power, and we need to embed youth in all the decision-making process. And it shouldn't be like just we need youth inclusion. We need to provide youth with those seats as a decision-making table. And I'm calling you now, all these people at this room, when you go back home, when a young person approaches you, don't question their experience. Give them the platform to build that experience. So I think we all are responsible of bringing more youth on the table.
We can do better. Please give up together an applause for the response we have. And then you have a very interesting background. Serve as Chief of Staff to the President of Kenya. That's powerful. And then now serving as Director of Tony Blair. We'd just like to know your transition from governance to private sector. What case does this offer in terms of governance, accountability, leadership, and so forth?
Thank you. I can tell you two versions of this story. One that's very PC and one that's the truth. Public sector is tricky. It's complex, and you have to have your wits about you. When I was in the corporate sector, there were rules, there was a lot of clarity, and you could see the four corners of the room. So you knew outside of that boardroom, there was no other decision on this subject matter. And whatever was agreed by the CEO was final. In government, 15 people will be having the same discussion you are having, and resources allocated 15 different ways for the same projects, being executed by 6 different agencies. Because government is so big, you can't see all corners of it. And it's complex. And trying to hold that machine accountable is a very delicate process because public service, if you break it, it becomes dysfunctional and the country stops. If you push it too hard, it pushes back. As a political leader, you come in with a very defined mandate. You have 5 years to do your job. You can either pick the battle of trying to break the public service or trying to make it work for you in order to deliver on your commitments. For me, the biggest change I saw from private sector into public sector was the sheer amount of consensus building that was required across different stakeholders. The stakeholder mapping was very broad. The number of people you needed to bring into a discussion to get to a simple decision. So you have your MPs from your ruling party who may not agree with the direction you're going. You have MPs from the opposition who disagree every day about everything. And then you have public servants who are legacies of a previous administration and they actually don't like you. And then you have your own team that is too busy empire building and they don't have time to focus on the job. So you really do have to mollycoddle, bring people together, convince them and say, you know, in public the head of state will say, I demand that this and this thing will be done. And in a national holiday, he will give a directive. But behind the scenes, there is a lot of work going on to say, look, the president was not demanding. What he actually meant was that he would like your support in this particular issue so that we can get it over the line. Why am I talking to the chair of the Budget Appropriation Committee? Because they hold my cash. If they don't appropriate money into the ministry, I cannot execute my programs. So I discovered that humility is perhaps the single most important skill set that you must go into with government. You know, in corporate, you start telling guys, oh, I'm the MD of this, and I'm in charge of 1, 2, 3. In government, actually, you start from very far. In most cases, people don't even say what they do in a meeting. They just say, I'm from the ministry of this and this. Because they don't want to be profiled. And they don't want it to interfere with their stakeholder engagement process. So if I would say these 2 skill sets, listening, humility, and the ability to corral people towards a decision, to be able to sell a vision from the head of state, and to be able to get all the actors, even partially, to agree to execute in that direction. And I empathize with the chair of the Public Accounts Committee because you must hear all manner of excuses from the government. And most of them, believe it or not, are true. Because the minister will tell you genuinely, you gave me this money, I wanted to spend it, but the corporation head of the implementing agency went rogue and decided instead of going through a public procurement process to get best value for money, they gave the tender to a relative and those guys could not deliver. And that's the reality of government.
Very good. Great experience. I think we can do better with that. Please applause for the panelists so far. Very powerful experience.